Hello, I'm back. It's been quite a hectic couple of months, but I have now handed in all of my assignments at university, so I'm free for the summer, apparently. And I'm very happy to be coming back with another TBR Spin video because I have been loving this series. If you've seen any of my other updates on this, you'll know that I've had loads of favourites on this TBR Spin selection. It's coming out with some absolute bangers. So today, not only am I going to be choosing my May pick, this is TBR Spin May, but I'll also be reviewing Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut, which was my April pick. So this month's prompt was a book with an even number of pages, and I have to say from my stack, there were only about 3 that were uneven, so it was basically a pick your own. It was, you know, I had pretty much free reign. And after all the heavy reading that I've been doing for university, I was like, let's choose something light. And so I've gone for Akwaeke Emezi's You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, because whilst I think Akwaeke Emezi is a literary writer, this is touted as a romance, and I thought that would be a little bit easier than perhaps some of the other things on here, and I just wanted that lightness. And it's May, and it feels like this is a summer read. I've got this really beautiful edition with sprayed edges. It just felt really summery, and I was like, I think at the end of May, I need this, because it is the end of May. By the time I've had it in all my assignments. I am actually halfway through it. I started it this weekend, but I'm not going to tell you any thoughts yet. I will tell you that I have not read any Akwaeke Emezi yet. This will be my first. This is my first Akwaeke Emezi. Not because I haven't wanted to read their other books. It just so happens that this is the first one I've had a chance to pick up. I'm going in a bit blind, other than knowing that it's a romance, that people have talked about the fact that it's very graphic. Other than that, I don't know anything, so we'll see. My pick for April was Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut. This was under Kieran's prompt of essentially choosing whichever book from my list that I wanted to read, because I'd read over a certain number of pages across the whole challenge so far, so I could have free reign to pick any book. And this is the one I chose because I've been doing a lot of work on war literature and trauma theory for my literature module at university, and so as this is like an absolute key text in that sort of canon, that war literature canon, I wanted to try this one. And this book has surprised me so much. It's very rare for me to want to tab a book on first reading. Normally I'm very keen to just read a book cover to cover, get my initial reaction to it, and then if I go back and reread, then to start tabbing and annotating. But this one, I felt literally so compelled to mark out sections of this that were just like, yeah, this is so true, or like, this really aligns with the stuff I've been learning. I was quite nervous going into this. It sat on my shelves for a while because I thought it would be too heavy for me. It's touted as a postmodern piece of fiction, and often I find postmodern literature can be really complex and can be quite impenetrable, but this was not that. This was so easy to read. I devoured it. It took me only a couple of sittings. If you have already read this and you loved it, then the short story collection that I've been reading for my literature module is called The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. It's a very interesting collection of short stories by a veteran of the Vietnam War. And he describes it as a collection of fictions because in some respects you could read it as a novel. All the characters are the same throughout. It all relates to his time in Alpha Company. So they all relate to each other, but they can also be read in any order on their own. Like, we specifically looked at one story, but then I went on to read the whole collection because I was so interested in this idea. So yeah, if you've already read this and you loved it, I would highly recommend The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. So for those who haven't read Slaughterhouse Five yet, this is about the Dresden bombing. This is when the Allied forces bombed essentially a civilian town called Dresden in Germany on the basis that they were rescuing these American prisoners of war. The Dresden bombing was ostensibly a rescue mission for these prisoners of war, but it was massive overkill in terms of the firepower, how badly Dresden was bombed. Considering the fact that it was a mainly civilian town, there was no key, ammunitions factories, there was nothing of importance other than these prisoners of war. So the amount of force of this bombing is very bizarre, and I think that's what Kurt Vonnegut has been grappling with for a long time. This edition is particularly interesting because at the end, so the actual novel, this is quite a large one, the actual novel is only about 170 pages, but at the end of this edition is Things like the first drafts of his first chapters, which got quite radically changed. There's also a letter from Kurt Vonnegut to his parents when he'd first been rescued to let them know what had happened and the fact that he was now safe. And even in this letter, like, it comes across as sarcastic, like, and almost humorous. I think in his disbelief at what had happened, it's a really fascinating letter to read, just in the way he describes what's happened to him. So obviously I've mentioned this in the context of trauma theory, which is something that has really interested me, but don't let that put you off, because it's not massively sad. It's very bizarre. It's quite humorous. He tells it from the perspective of this main character who believes that he travels in time through his own life, who has been abducted by aliens and kept in an alien zoo on a planet called Tralfamador. It's bizarre, it's funny, and it's so dry. Like, when he talks about trauma, when he talks about the war, I think this is why I've had to tab it, like, so like this. The dog who had sounded so ferocious in the winter distances was a female German shepherd. She was shivering, her tail was between her legs. She had been borrowed that morning from a farmer. She had never been to war before. She had no idea what game was being played. Her name was Princess. It's just these little observations, these little things that are just, I think he's so clever. It is so short and jumbled and jangled, Sam, because there is nothing intelligent to say about a massacre. Everybody is supposed to be dead, to never say anything or want anything ever again. Everything is supposed to be quiet after a massacre, and it always is, except for the birds. And what do the birds say? All there is to say about a massacre, things like, poo to eat. Like, yeah, this book is absolutely brilliant. I think I've gone on about it enough. I may do a video about some of the stuff I've been learning about trauma theory and how it's connected to some of the texts that I've been reading, but I'm not sure because that's quite a heavy topic for BookTube, but we'll see. I have plans for things coming that might be a bit more academic, but we'll see. But yeah, if you haven't read it, I really highly recommend this. This is quite likely to be one of my favourite books of the year. Yeah, another one. And then next month, which, I mean, as this is already the end of May, it won't be too long before I'm telling you my thoughts on Akwaeke Emezi's You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. Thanks, guys!